Welcome back to Devy Degens. We are on week 2 of this pod and finishing up week 1 of the college football week. I am Noah Green, and with me, as always, is Todd Vincent. Todd, how's it going?
Good. Just finished up, run through some box scores of some of the games I didn't catch this weekend. It's pretty action packed. So just trying to get all the info crammed in.
I always forget before week 1 of NCAA just how much information there is in every single week to sift through. It's absolutely insane. So we are going to do our best this week to help y'all sift through some of that information and hit up the week. Just before we kick off, I want to just do a quick rundown of what we're going to talk about today. We want to start with a section on Devy and C2C trading strategy. One of the things Todd and I have talked about wanting to do on this pod is really focus on the strategy aspect of the game and keep our eyes as much as possible on the forest rather than getting so caught up with the trees. It's really important when sifting through all this information, especially after a week like this, to keep your eye on the big picture strategy. So we want to focus on that. And today we will be talking about trading. We're going to do a week 1 breakdown with some stock up, stock down players for both the Devy and the C2C CFF side. We'll chat a little bit about some of the impact of some of the new faces in the new places. So some new coaches, some transfers that may or may not have had impact. And as always, we are each going to share a next man up, a young guy, an incoming freshman to focus on. So with that, let's kick off with our overview of trading. So when we are thinking, and as with last week, we will always break it down this way. We will differentiate between thinking about a straight Devy league and a C2C league in any strategy conversation that we have, because the strategy definitely does change when you are managing a C2C team versus a Devy team. And for anyone who didn't listen last week, just a quick reminder that the major difference between Devy and C2C, which stands for campus to Canton, is that on a Devy team, your college assets do not accrue any points for you in a given week. They are simply assets that are on your team and will only give you actual points and value once they move to the NFL. Whereas with a campus to Canton or C2C league, you are managing a college side, so the actual college production matters. And obviously that change makes a big difference in strategy. So let's start out with Devy. We get a lot of questions. I definitely get a lot of questions about Devy trading and how when you're in a Devy league where everybody has 5, maybe 10 Devy assets, how does that change your approach to trading? So Todd, just like when you're in a Devy league, do you look at trading differently, both on the NFL and on the Devy side? And how do you think about approaching trading in a Devy league?
One of the biggest things to remember for especially new Devy players, is that your Devy assets are tradable assets. They're not just guys that are going to sit there their whole college career and then come up to your NFL team. I think it's the more common approach in Devy should be to package Devy only players for NFL assets, just because you're not getting those points from the college side. So you can see even college producers, it's still a long road to get it to NFL draft capital and then be impactful on the NFL side. So that would be the main difference, I would think. And one big thing to go, I get it all the time, but for both Devy and C2C, kind of the rule of thumb is to not trade proven NFL producers for straight college or Devy assets. You always want to kind of get something back. If you tier down, if you're trading a wide receiver and you want to get a tiered down wide receiver back in return, just because the hit rates are so bad and the Devy only assets is something you just don't want to take on that risk. I mean, at some point you can mitigate it and you're already taking it on if it's an elite asset like a Caleb Williams or a Marvin Harrison. Obviously, you're gonna have to pay up to get those guys the closer they get to the draft and the more solidified the profile becomes. But for guys who are strict Devy assets and a couple years away, it's a lot of risk to take on. Another thing I'd say, I know we got this question on Twitter when we asked for questions on the show. There was some about taking on. Someone took on a Devy orphan and said, "There's not very many Devy assets here, and what do I do? Who do I trade to get this?" I wouldn't take it that way. If it's a straight Devy league, you want to think of the Devy assets as supplementing your NFL squad. You're never going to do enough on the Devy side to completely rebuild a bad NFL team. So it's all right to target those guys coming up if you want to like trade off an aging player and acquire more assets, but you don't want to target it as I need to trade off NFL guys so I get stronger Devy guys to come up, because if you hit on them, you're just selling for nothing.
So, interesting. So when you're thinking about a Devy side, basically the Devy portfolio across a league, in some ways, what you're saying is it doesn't in some ways matter. It's totally okay to actually have no Devy assets in a league if you've been able to convert those Devy assets into NFL production, and you'd be comfortable having a Devy team with less and in some cases maybe even none on the Devy side. Like, I know we got another question on Twitter from someone who was in a win now mode, and she said that she was thinking of trying to trade an NFL asset to add a Devy asset. And I kind of said, look, if you're win now on the NFL, I wouldn't worry about having no Devy assets right now. Like, there'll be a Devy draft next year. You can add Devy assets then and stay focused. Is that how you think about it also?
Yeah, that's what I would do. You don't want to build backwards. You don't want to trade off proven stuff for unproven stuff, hoping that the unproven stuff turns into proven production. It's kind of how you chase your tail. I know we saw this a while ago on Twitter. Someone asked about posting your starting lineups a while ago for college, and someone posted their lineup, and it was just chock full of Devy studs, like guys, like 5 of the guys that are top 8 or 10 in C2C startups or Devy startups, all in the same lineup. And you're like, how is this possible? And it's like, well, and they posted like, well, my NFL side is not competitive, and not competitive was a complete understatement. Like, the NFL team was 0 chance of winning a single game. Like, they had guys that were probably like in waiver consideration in a regular team, 12-team league, all filled in their starters. Like, there's no way. And there's no way you're going to be able to do that with Devy hit rates. There's no way you're going to be able to turn all those Devy assets into a competitive NFL side. You're just going to be chasing your tail. You're going to be trading those Devy assets for NFL assets that are already devalued, because that's why someone's traded them. It's just going to go full circle. There's basically no possible way you'll turn that around.
So in a Devy league right now, like we're generally on the same page about this. That Marvin Harrison Jr., for example, is the wide receiver 3 in Dynasty right now. I know he's yours. Is he someone you're trying to trade for right now in a Devy league?
Yeah, he's like the type of guy, Hammer Caleb Williams. This is when you target it. It's maybe the only time you'll get a discount, because some people may be really risk averse and think, well, the bottom could still fall out. We saw it with Keyshawn Butte last year or something like that. Those are mostly character issues, I think, there, and I don't ever see that happening with Marvin Harrison. But there's still a risk. Like, there's a risk he tears his ACL and then he doesn't play his rookie year, and then you're a 2-year out asset. There's always going to be these risks with it. But yeah, those are the type of guys. There's like a very select handful, like maybe add Brock Bowers to that, because if you're tight end, especially in tight end premium, it's a difference maker. But there's very few of those guys that you can get away with trading an established NFL player for only a Devy asset. And that's a risk I'd take on with that type of guy. But outside of a handful, it's going to be a losing battle.
Yeah, interesting. Does that change as the season goes along for you?
I don't know. It's hard to say.
Like, if you're not competing, so for listeners who play Dynasty leagues, right? If you get to a point in the season you're not competing, a pretty traditional move is to start selling your NFL assets for draft picks. Are you doing in a Devy league? Are you starting to think, if you get to, say, we're in week 7, week 8, and you're 2-5, you've got injuries and you're plugging holes and the lineup's not working, are you starting to think about potentially acquiring Devy assets, moving some NFL guys?
yeah, at that point, I guess it's because the rookie gap's going to be Devy depleted. Those guys, for the most part, aren't
Yeah,
going to be part of it. It's kind of the only way
yeah,
you're gonna get them. Uh, but then you got to kind of weigh on who you're giving up to be in that position. So it's still risk. It's riskier than the pick itself. Like in the standard
yeah,
dynasty league, if you trade for the picks are the asset themselves, and you can always move them on the draft board at the time, whatever. If you pick someone who, if you trade for the Devy asset and they get hurt or they slip in the draft or whichever, the bottom falls out quickly. That's kind of what we talked about before. I talked about it in like C2C and Devy and draft strategies about some people will tend to favor guys who are in their draft eligible year, thinking they're a safer asset because they're closer to being drafted, but they don't have the value insulation for that reason. If they get hurt or if the
right.
draft stock slips, then they're basically a zero asset. Whereas the other guys, if they're like a 5-star freshman or incoming freshman or whichever, like a Zachariah Branch, for instance, like he's flashed already a couple times. He's already climbing up massively up Devy rankings and C2C rankings, and you still have 2 years, almost 3 full years to build off that profile. Whereas a guy like go back to Butte or Zach Evans or that type of guy last year, that bottom falls out. They're a nothing asset on the NFL side. Like they could still happen, but you're stuck with them. You're holding the bag, basically.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. So just a recap of some Devy trading overview. In general rule, don't trade NFL assets for Devy only assets. Make sure you're getting at least some NFL value back. When comparing Devy assets to draft picks, Devy assets have much more variance and are much more volatile. Draft picks are known on a value sense. The way I think of draft picks is that they're like bonded assets. Basically, they're secure to retain value because, as you said, they don't get injured. There's none of the external. They don't play badly. Their value is a little pretty locked in.
Yeah.
Whereas with Devy assets, it's much less locked in. So be careful when you're moving players for Devy assets. It is okay to take a shot at acquiring really high end talent. We're talking Caleb Williams, Marvin Harrison Jr., Brock Bowers, guys that are at the absolute like slam dunk top of their position. That's really clear cut. And it was, I know, deliberate. We skipped running back there with regard to the 24 class because there is not a locked and loaded RB1 in the 24 class that we're certain is going to be. There's no Bijan this year. And he would have fallen into that category probably last year of guys
Yeah.
that would be a little safer to trade for. How does this change for you at all with C2C? Are you more willing to move? Like, how do you balance that? How do you balance it out differently with C2C, at least on the college side, or do you still look at it as I don't want to move an NFL asset for college assets?
Well, I still prefer to tier down at least and get an NFL asset coming back. But I guess you're kind of willing to take on a little bit more risk, knowing that the guy's going to produce points on your college side for you and give you a chance to win that side. So it's kind of like I have a 16-team league that I'll bring this up. We talked about earlier. So a really fun trade
Yeah.
was someone traded Zachariah Branch, USC freshman wide receiver, for Calvin Ridley and Sky Moore. So this is a really unique one in that a typical C2C trade you'd see like the Ridley side get Ridley only, and the Zachariah Branch side would usually get the Sky Moore, which is even that's a pretty big tier down, but high upside to Sky Moore if you're a fan of him. But it's interesting because Ridley with the absence, like I'm still pretty set on him he has wide receiver 1 potential for the next couple of years, I think, in that offense. So I'm okay with it. But just typically that's something you'd see with a wide receiver of his age, and with that risk, you would see the Branch side get a lesser NFL asset like Sky Moore, because even though everyone loves Branch and he's a super high-end C2C and Devy asset, there's still a ton of risk there. But he's played 2 college games. There's still 3 years of him production, injury, lifestyle, whichever. You still got to remember these are 18, 19, 20-year-old kids. You don't know what affects them outside of school. lots of stuff can happen. So usually to mitigate that risk, you're getting that secondary NFL asset back. This one was a unique one that seems kind of, I would say it's kind of like a peripheral, it's kind of an overpay, but I get to that, that you could be swayed. If you're taking on Ridley, you're saying
Sure.
you could say that you're taking on risk as well. So it's but that's a super interesting one. I really like that trade.
Yeah, that's a really interesting trade. I like that a lot also. And within the college side itself, let's say we're keeping NFL side out of it and thinking about a C2C trade or even a Devy trade of just college for college assets. Is there any point at which you are moving Devy assets that you have long term that you think have long term potential for college production, or are you pretty steadfast on holding those Devy assets and seeing how they accrue value?
Yeah, I'm pretty happy to stick with the Devy assets. The CFF assets are they're I mean they're both fragile. You got to think of it like the risk involved, but the CFF, like we talked last week, the CFF assets are they have one utility. That's to score points for your college
Yeah.
team, and that's it. And it's pretty rare that any of them turn into anything NFL wise, and it's pretty clear cut. We kind of know that going in. Uh, so I would stray the other way. I've done some trades that way. Like last year, I traded A.T. Perry for Ted McMillan early on, straight up
Okay.
over one. So A.T. Perry kind of falls in that bucket of a high end CFF producer with, I mean, some sort of NFL upside, but is it a regular role? Is it going to change, be a difference maker on your
Right.
NFL side? I doubt it. It's kind of a long shot.
Probably not.
So I'll make
Yeah.
those trades all day, get in that high end.
So you
Devy
got
asset
Tet.
in
You
return.
you
I
traded
got
A.T.
Tet.
Perry for Tet. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's and I've already looked at some trade conversations around say example a guy like Cameron Seldon, who I know you're not as big of a fan of, but who I think has enormous upside and potential for growth as a Devy asset. And I'm very reluctant to move him for say a guy like a Jermaine Brown from UAB. Like that is not something
Yeah.
I'm really interested in because I feel like I'll find some other way to get CFF points. I'll figure out how to do that. I would rather not give up. Seldon goes in the fifth, sixth, seventh round of C2C startups. Has a lot of value retention, and he may not see the field for a little bit. Running backs don't have to. Like I think it's important with Devy assets and with college assets in general to be patient. I know we're about to jump into week one breakdown here, but I think patience is a huge theme that we'll probably touch on a bunch. So yeah, just before we even jump into it, how much stock do you put into week one overall?
Uh, like I would say, we talked about this off air a little bit. For me, Devy wise, not a ton. I'd say on the Devy side, be patient. If these guys didn't hit, or even if they did, be patient and don't overreact to a big, maybe primetime performance game that a lot of eyes were on and stuff like that. CFF side in C2C for CFF only producers, now I would say to react harshly because,
Right.
like we talked about last episode, the CFF community, lots of times the points they're chasing are schemes and not player dependent. Lots of times they're just trying to target the guy who's going to get that role in a certain scheme. And we've seen it a bunch already in the first week. And some people played week 0, 2 weeks with a 2-week sample size out of your CFF side is only 10-week regular season. We've seen 1 and 2 weeks where these guys are not the guys we thought they were. And it's apparent that there's other guys in those roles. And now for me, it's time to pounce on those guys and get those guys now while they can before they start hitting 2 and 3. Once they start hitting 2 and 3 weeks of production in that role, someone else is going to have them on their squad.
Totally. Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. And I think that's where week one clarifies a lot of questions about who has those roles in college and who seems to have it. It is important to remember that those roles do change over time over the course of the year. So there are a lot of examples historically last year, the year before, of players who absolutely smashed in the first couple of weeks. And whether it be injury, whether it be just someone coming up and taking a job as the course of the season goes along, or someone getting a chance with some carries and really standing out. Those things do change. So like the on the CFF side, the waiver wire needs to be watched incredibly closely and reacted to accordingly. Whereas on the Devy side, it's important to kind of maintain patience and not overreact. What any huge overall shockers for you this weekend before stock up, stock down?
Like game wise
Besides
or player
LSU,
wise?
yeah. Besides that, yeah, and anything wise. I mean, besides LSU losing, and not just losing, not getting it handed to them.
Yeah. I mean, Texas Tech lost to Wyoming. That's pretty
Texas
terrible.
Tech did lose to Wyoming. That was pretty bad.
Uh
And Texas State beat Baylor.
yeah, that's
Also,
also
that was
also a
another
pretty
big
bad
one.
one.
Yeah.
Player wise, like high end Devy asset player wise, I think there's some. We'll get into them, but there's some pretty big ones that were. I don't know. We'll have to see
Hit
how
us
they
in.
go.
Transition us in.
So, like Raheem Sanders is one for me. He was
Yeah.
not good against really weak competition, and there's been talk all training camp. He's 242 pounds. They said it's like 6'2", 242-pound running back, and he averaged I think 2.5, less than 3 yards a carry against a really subpar competition yesterday. He did have 2 touchdowns, but and I think like for me, and I know for quite a few people, the knock on him long term is that he doesn't play to his size already. So getting bigger and not playing to it is not something I was a really big fan of seeing. I think he had. I know a lot of people are high in his pass catching ability too. He came in as a tight end. I think he had 2 dump off passes for negative yards yesterday. So
yeah, he was not involved.
That's a rough look for me.
It was, and they had going to your scheme chasing point. One of the concerns coming in that I do think also maybe contributed to Sanders was that they had an offensive coordinator change and a scheme change in Arkansas, and so there were people who were saying we might not see the same role for Sanders. Dan Enos is the coordinator there now. He tends to run, whereas it was Kendall Briles who. Briles was at Ole Miss with Kiffin, so he runs a very open system. It's run heavy, but also backs in the passing game, et cetera, et cetera. Enos is a little more traditional. Those things have impact also.
It wasn't.
Any other
they
names?
Did win. Like it was a blowout victory. If you look at the box score, all the other running backs averaged like 6.5, 7 yards a carry. He averaged like 2.5 to less than 3.
That's a bad. That's a bad trend that needs to be watched. Just a recent memory example of a guy who that trend emerged for and ended up seeing draft stock absolutely crash was Isaiah Spiller. At Texas A&M, he was like a first round Devy pick early on and was being called RB1 of the class. People call Sanders that, and then things started to emerge about the efficiency comparison when other backs were on the field in the same offense in that Texas A&M scheme, and his efficiency was just far below theirs. So that's a huge thing to watch. I have I think one Sanders share, and he put up some CFF. He put up good CFF numbers for me because of touchdowns, but we'll be watching that from the Devy side for sure. Sticking on the running back theme, I've seen a lot of very pro Braylon Allen reactions to this week, and some comments that I've seen people say he may be a first round pick. I was concerned by his performance. First of all, similarly to Sanders, Ches Malusi actually was way more efficient with his touches, and I got more touches in more important parts of the game against Buffalo, which Wisconsin actually struggled a little against Buffalo. The final score looked decent, but they did not run away with it at all. And what did you think of watching Braylon Allen run? Do you see a first round NFL pick there?
No. I brought him up last week as one of my guys that was lower on.
Yeah.
So I don't see it. I don't want to keep harping on these guys, and I just find people fall in love with these broken tackle machine type running backs. And like someone posted, I saw a post today about his broken tackles, and the clip I saw, he was literally stumbling forward, and he had a receiver blocking on the outside. Instead of going around the block, taking the outside, he ran right into the guy that was on a block. And like you count those as broken tackles because he bounced off like 3 guys on the way there. But he's literally just leaning forward, stumbling. I just don't. I don't know. I see a lot of you're not going to tackle him high. He's another guy. He's 240 pounds, right? I see almost every time he goes down and gets tackled, he's getting tripped up, and all it takes is someone brushing his legs, and he's tripping over his own feet. He kind of runs really with his feet in front of each other a lot if you watch his tape, which is weird. And he's a converted linebacker too, you got to remember. So he hasn't played a ton of running back. So also that's another offensive coordinator change, right? Phil Longo is there now, right? So you think back to a couple years ago at North Carolina, he had Javonte Williams and Michael Carter, and he split them pretty evenly. They both had really nice seasons, but it was a pretty even split. So if we see the same thing with Malusi, who a couple years ago people were kind of high on because he took over for Jalen Berger, who people thought were going to be the next guy after Jonathan Taylor left Wisconsin. So if we see a kind of even split there, then I don't know how that grades out for him long term. I know he had 7 receptions, I think, but they were for like 30 something yards, and I didn't see much of that game, but I know
7 for 25, 7 for 25.
So I know he's talked about it, like wanting to get more involved in the passing game to show something he can do. So I don't know if they scheme that during weaker competition to try and get him those plays on tape. I have no idea really, but if it turns into an even split down the road, it can't be great for his future outlook. I don't think too many people have Ches Malusi pegged as a day 2 NFL draft prospect. So
no, I hadn't heard the name until you texted me about it. Actually, 2 other of these same category, and then we'll get off the harping of it. But just it really fit the same profile of really tall, big type running backs that didn't have necessarily the type of start you'd hope to see. Jaquindon Jackson and Trey Benson. I know you mentioned Trey last week. And the Jaquindon Jackson, both usage and output, I would say were concerning, especially given Utah having no first-string quarterback. I mean, it could be that Florida's run defense was really strong, and potentially we see a bounce back from Jaquindon. I definitely am concerned as a Devy asset for his prospects, though. He's a Devy guy that I don't want to overreact. I want to see a couple more weeks, but I think some of the optimism has tempered a little bit on that side.
Yeah, definitely. And he's another one that was kind of a perfect storm of things where he's a converted quarterback.
Yep.
And we saw like Roschon Johnson get a lot of hype last year at Texas coming into like the draft season, and people were talking about if he wasn't stuck behind Bijan, he would be a day 2 pick. And I think that comp got made a little bit. Jackson had quite a bit of like garbage time, touchdown, short yardage work last year towards the end of the season. And they also had Tavian Thomas was a big CFF producer for Utah for the past couple of years. And I think maybe all of us maybe kind of got ahead of ourselves and thought Jaquindon Jackson's the 1-for-1 comp and the 1-for-1 same big, heavy, short yardage guy, grinder between the tackles, better athlete than Tavian Thomas, which was a big knock on him. So I think maybe a lot of us thought this is a 1-for-1 substitution. He flits in that spot. He was a CFF stud. Wheels are up, and then not great. I think he had like 5 carries for 15 yards or something ridiculous.
Yeah, not great at all. Yeah, not great.
They didn't have a quarterback like they had. Like Cam Rising didn't play, but I don't know how much that affects their overall offense there. And Trey Benson he's the same. Like I mentioned last week, I'm not super high on him, and I think a lot of his hype is tied into the FSU hype, and kind of as they go, he'll go. But I don't know if I'm like I said, I'm not super high on long term. But if you are, I don't think it's necessarily something to worry about because I think LSU kind of sold out to stop the run last time. It was pretty evident from the start, and FSU played a lot of Toafili at running back. He's a little more smaller burstier and pass catcher. I think they just kind of schemed it that way to have more options because I think they knew LSU, because LSU did the same thing. They shut Trey Benson down last year. He had like 6 carries for 2 yards carry or something last year as well. The that game was, yeah, LSU not making any adjustments and playing off coverage on Coleman and Johnny Wilson all game. It's just crazy.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I'm not utterly surprised to see that from a Brian Kelly coach team. That's something that's been a thing for him for years. At Notre Dame, also the lack of adjustments, just like you would just see, it was stunning sometimes. I went to Notre Dame Stadium for an SC Notre Dame game during the Brian Kelly era, and the Notre Dame fans were literally talked about the lack of adjustments. Like you could hear them just frustrated constantly. So
it was pretty stunning.
Yeah. Let's you want to talk about OSU a little bit? No. Just because I think a lot. No, I mean a lot of people have a lot. What? So, real fast. I mean, Did you get to see any of the OSU game at all?
I watched a little bit of it on my phone while I had my son at the skate park, but I saw enough to have I thought Marvin Harrison was going to save his day with that touchdown. They got called back for a taunting foul after the catch, I believe, which is crazy. But yeah, that's one I would say don't overreact. Don't let one game take away from 5-6 years of Ryan Day, what he's done there. The one thing I'll say, I think the offensive line is the problem there more than anything from what I've seen from clips. I saw McCord make a few nice plays, nice throws. I don't know if he's going to come along as the season goes along. I don't know how much of a detriment it was to have that whole quarterback competition go the entire offseason to where it came right up to opening kickoff before they're like, hey, this is our guy, we're settled in. I don't know how that how that affects kids. I don't know how they were. I don't know if McCord thought for sure this was his job, and then he had to play this out. And I know Devin Brown's a super talented kid too, but I just don't know. I don't know how it plays out. I think maybe the move is to name the guy after the spring and go forward, and then make an adjustment if the other guy have to outplay him by enough to change your mind. Then
that's an interesting idea. I mean, I'm trying to think through examples of guys who won their jobs, who were late announcees as their starters. And I wonder if there's actually even a trend where, because you think about some of the Connor Wegman, for example, wasn't named starter until 2 days before the game. Because I remember I mentioned him last week as a guy to watch to have their value go up. And I think he had an outstanding first game and incredible connection with Evan Stewart. Like that, the talent he has at receiver and running back is unbelievable there. And I just feel like Petrino is going to help continue to develop him. He's got a great track record developing those QBs. But he smashed. And I think in some ways, I almost wonder if the examples I'm thinking of where guys didn't actually succeed as much are when they were the older guy, the kind of more established name with a younger, maybe hotter talent. So like McCord, Devin Brown, for example. And then they weren't named until late, and they didn't have a chance to kind of retain the job against the upstart player. Whereas Wegman kind of took the job almost from Max Johnson, who was the more veteran guy, and went in. I think about Rashada, Dante Moore played really well when he got his chances in there, right? Like that almost. I wonder if you're onto something there, though, just to watch those QB battles going down in the future, and we'll see over the course of the year. Any risk of MHJ having a JSN year or a Jamar Chase year?
No, I hope not. I mean, I don't see it, but I think they'll be too good. I think they'll be too competitive I don't see him just sitting, but it is something to think about. I mean, it gets to the point where, if he takes another hit like he did in the game last year against Georgia and gets a concussion or something like that, anything can happen. It's one of those things that we'll never get the full story of JSN last year how bad the injury was, and if it did cause him to sit out the whole year, if it just got to a certain point where he wasn't willing to risk his future for it. Like there are big implications, so it's hard to know. But
Yeah.
I don't think so. Not now. I hope not.
Yeah. And any concern with Egbuka or Travion? I mean, it's definitely waiting with Egbuka. I don't know what he just didn't get targeted all that much and didn't have it successful. Like Julian Fleming outperformed him by a bunch, which was a name that, like, that's a name I haven't. That was a very hot name for a while, and I think people kind of wrote him off. It'll just be an interesting room to watch. With
I think Stover led them with like 6 for 98 yesterday, which is what a little bit I saw was the only passes they were hitting was down the seam. So maybe that's why.
Interesting.
And that's why Fleming and Stover did that. But
yeah, interesting. And I think Travion Henderson's another one to keep an eye on. Just being cautious of the Devy stock. Mayan Williams is an absolute bruiser. They have a very deep running back room, and he's just someone to keep an eye on as he comes back from injury and kind of rounds into form after last year to see if he can get back to where he was before that. Are you at all nervous about him at this point, or are you still
Trayvon's he's still my running back one from the class. I think he just has traits that no one else in the class does. I think if you go back to his freshman season, his change of direction and his acceleration and burst is just different. Mayan Williams is like he's one of those weird guys that's huge. He's like an NFL player, but he's like a day 3 and he's one of those weird guys that they're always going to have a role, but he's not going to. I think the big thing with him is that he has Ryan Day's trust, right? He doesn't fumble. He's efficient around the goal line, but other than that, he's not. He's kind of like fit Kyron Williams, I guess. I don't know. He's the sub athlete. He's just dependable. The coaches like him, but he doesn't offer a lot to. He's not someone I worry about. He's not someone I think is outplaying Travion or the reason Travion's not going to succeed.
Yeah. All right. Stock up ideas. Anyone we kind of hit stock down first, I feel like. Anyone else stock down that you want to bring up before we go back to stock up?
I think Quinn Ewers. I mean, it's time to. I mean, he was okay, not great. He's still at this point where he's not elevating an offense, that's for sure. And they're gonna have some decisions to make if they played Bama this week. So if he plays like he did last year against Bama before the injury, then we're safe. But if not, it's time to start asking questions. You got like Malik Murphy is a big transfer candidate. There was rumors of him going in the portal this year. And then you got Arch Manning sitting there, right? Like, so it's time to start discussing this Quinn Ewers development and how long of a leash he's got. Like, he's made some questionable decisions. I don't know if you know the backstory to him, where he reclassified his high school year up a year to go to Ohio State so he could collect NIL money and then transfer to Texas. Because the whole reason he reclassified was because Texas high schoolers couldn't make NIL money. So out of matter of principle, he reclassified. But he was already old for his high school class. So when he reclassified, he went back to the age he should have been, his right age. But he sacrificed a year of high school development to do that, to go sit on the bench at Ohio State. So he's and then last year with the injury and stuff, he's not played. He's basically had 2 years where he didn't play football in between. So I don't know. It's interesting. Yeah. But he's one of those guys. He's got all the arm talent, but his mechanics are so lazy that I don't know if no one's got to him now. Can they fix it? Is it something that coaches are just going to ignore and be like, this is fixable and teachable, and the arm talent's not teachable, and we're going to go with that? And so I don't know. You just like to see him. They got enough on offense. You'd like to see him elevate an offense instead of just kind of keeping it afloat.
Yeah, totally agree. And I think that's the same question with Joe Milton after last week, is whether or not he's going to be able to elevate an offense and do anything other than throw the ball down the field. and really coordinate the type of offense that Heupel wants to run. There were definitely he made some great throws. He has
Yeah.
an electric arm, but I do think that's a question of that what that team is going to look like. And I think although they ended up winning pretty big, they were much more run heavy than I think a lot of people expected, especially after we saw what we saw last year. And that's a passing game to watch both for the receivers and for Milton's Devy track and C2C track, honestly.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting case study in that maybe people like boosted up the Heupel offense, which we know everyone wants a piece of it, but maybe they took too much stock in that and maybe downplayed having Hooker and Jalen Hyatt in that offense.
Yeah.
But Jalen Hyatt definitely got a boost from it. But whether you like him or not, or whether you like him long term or not, he's an NFL caliber player. So you can't say, even the big programs, you can't say that across the board every year. They did have an NFL caliber quarterback, whether he's a backup long term. They did have an NFL caliber receiver playing the slot with 4.4 speed or whichever. Maybe those guys did have a bigger impact to the system functioning the way it did than we think, or maybe it's just a bit of a learning curve. But Joe Milton's, he should have started last year. He lost the job to Hooker last year. Like, he's been not good multiple times with multiple teams. We've seen it. I mean, the arm talent it's there. It's tantalizing. Like, you can't, not too many guys can throw the ball 80, 90 yards in the air, but I don't know. He's just not been impressive anywhere he's been for an extended period of time.
Yep, absolutely. And Squirrel White was a guy, I think I mentioned Squirrel last week as somebody I was definitely tempering hype on. I have concerns about his NFL potential given his size, and think this week he had a really rough first week. So yeah, keep an eye on the Tennessee offense. All right, stock up. Should we start with Colorado?
Yeah,
that was, I mean, that kicked off the whole weekend. And I can't wait to see the ratings. I would imagine with the combination of Spectrum and Disney having a fallout literally seconds before the Florida-Utah game started, causing everybody's screens to black out and like millions of folks to lose access to a ton of games this weekend. I would imagine that game got incredible viewer numbers. Is my guess. My guess is it will end up being the highest rated game of the weekend, and it did not disappoint. What do you think? Is Colorado for real? Was TCU overrated? The answer is yes, but combination of both.
Yes to both. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's difficult. Like, this is our first look at Shooter Sanders playing like Division I competition. He's an interesting story. If you go back on the Overtime YouTube channel, they have a series where they followed Dion and Shooter Sanders his entire senior season of high school. He played in like that small Texas Catholic high school loop, the same one that Preston Stone played in. They actually lost the Preston Stone's team in the championship. And then obviously went to Jackson State. So the level of competition is a little bit different than temper expectations. I don't know. It's hard to say if he's a long-term NFL caliber quarterback. He is, like, from watching him a lot on that series and the game film I've seen, he's very accurate, like intermediate throws, and his leadership is exceptional. Like on that show, to see, like, imagine having Deion Sanders as your dad, everywhere you go is hype city and stuff. There's lots of times in that show where he's like consoling teammates that Deion was too hard on, and like it's an interesting dynamic to see. But you see the kids on the team really resonate with him, and he's quiet. He's a quiet leader too, which is kind of weird too, coming from Deion with those brashness and stuff. I guess you gotta kind of balance it out with him as your dad. But I mean, he had 38 for 47 for 510 yards and 4 touchdowns. Pretty impressive. And I know a lot of it, like following along, a lot of it, the first half was a lot of close to the line of scrimmage stuff and low ADOT, and then it kind of went on as the game went on. So that's interesting. They I think 3 receivers with over 100 yards, or maybe
Yep.
4 if you count Dylan Edwards.
Yeah, 4.
And 2 of those guys, and all of them are transfers up too. Like everyone knows Travis Hunter, who's the DB wide receiver, but
Jimmy Horn too, though. Xavier Weaver, Jimmy Horn,
Jimmy Horn were both G5 guys that came up to Colorado. And then Dylan Edwards is a super tiny jiggerbug running back who had a massive game. He's someone I would temper expectations on, though. He had scored like 4 touchdowns on 11 touches, so it's not going to carry on that way. And he's also tiny, so like there's not. As a Devy guy, I'm not really in on him, but as a CFF guy, if he's going to be that big of a part of the offense, like obviously that efficiency is not going to stay, but if he's a steady part of the offense, then it's something to go on. But yeah, they're definitely. I mean, TCU's down from last year. They're obviously not going to be a championship caliber team with that kind of output, but the same fact you're going to see Colorado play in the Pac-12 all year, where the defenses are pretty terrible. Like I imagine this offense rolls pretty decently all year, and they play a super fast tempo too.
They played incredibly fast. I mean, you hit it with Shedeur and the leadership. I would just look. I'll put it out, and it'll be a theme throughout the year, through the ups and downs, because there will be downs. But I'm a big Deion Sanders as a head coach guy. I'm a big fan. Some people are not a big fan. I'm a big fan of everything he does and the way he does it. Even the controversial parts. I just think he is an extraordinary leader. I think it is evident from everything you watch of him. And like you said, there's footage going back to him coaching teams and leading teams for years. And he gets guys so incredibly bought in. And one of the things I noticed, like in the first half, so Hunter had that big drop and he went over the sideline, like through his helmet, screaming obscenities. And Deion was right there in his face, just picking him up. Their kicker had a field goal blocked. Deion was right there in his face, picking him up. There was a fumble. Forget who fumbled. Deion was right there picking him up. Edwards fumbled, I think. And they all bounced back. That there is something. What he's going to be building there is real. Culture is a big deal, especially in college. Like we keep talking about, these are young 18, 19, 20-year-olds. That team is going to make noise, and they're going to run through some walls for him. And I love the way he is with the media. That's very controversial. Some folks are very upset about it. I am not upset about it. And I don't think it's attacking a reporter. If a reporter trashes your team, and that's their job, is to write an opinion about your team, and then you get up on stage and say, "Do you believe yet? Have you changed your opinion?" That to me I don't see a problem with that. And if I was a reporter, I would engage with that, because my job is actually to engage in that back and forth and answer your question. Do I really believe yet? You don't have to yet. So that's real interesting. And Shedeur, I heard Christian Williams talk about this over on Devy Royale, just from the NFL prospect. And Christian knows quarterbacks, is known for knowing quarterbacks real well. He was just mentioning he's a very over the top thrower, and that the NFL tends to prefer rotational throwers, and so keeping an eye on his mechanics and some of the more technical stuff. But he's got to be watched with over 500 yards of production, and they're going to throw up. I mean, Colorado USC is going to be bet. The only thing I'll say is bet the over. Like, bet the over Colorado USC, bet the over Colorado Washington, bet the over Colorado everyone. Always bet the over. If you bet the over every week with Colorado this year, it'll be a good year. Any other in terms of so FSU, Jordan Travis, Keon Coleman, any thoughts on them? Have they changed at all in your mind after yesterday?
Not really. I mean, Keon Coleman, I could probably bump up my rankings a little bit. I look because, like, Maddie, 5-star Maddie in the Degens crew he's a big Michigan State fan, so he's a big Keon Coleman guy. Him, I kind of tease him. We go back and forth because he thinks I have him too low and I hate him, whatever else. I looked at my rankings. I had him ranked 29th in my receivers for C2C, which is fine, which is kind of where it should be. I will say there's a spot like that. 8 to 10 guys in front of him are real full-on projections. So he could slide anywhere in that range, which would put him up in, like, if I move him up a few spots, it'd put him up in the top, I don't know, 6 or so for the class, which I think is fine.
Yeah.
I just don't. He's not an archetype guy I target. He's like a big contested catch guy. His route running is supremely limited, but he's a very good athlete and he's really strong at the catch point. So he does have that going for him. It's one of those things where I think because it was the only game on and it was prime time, this big matchup, and people talked about this as the week 1 matchup to watch all off season. All the eyeballs on it are kind of hyping this thing up. Like if this was a Saturday 4:00 game and people didn't watch it and they looked at the box scores, I mean, it's not new. I mean, he had a big game, he had 3 touchdowns, 120 yards. But he did this at Michigan State last year too. He had these games and against good competition. He had a big game against Michigan. He had a few games like this, but they're sporadic, and it comes with the player type too, right? And when you see what they play, like a lesser competition where they don't have to score as many points, and they got Trey Benson involved again. I don't know. You want the same kind of energy when he goes for a 4-catch, 36-yard game. You want everyone to come back to drop him down. Right? That's what I'm saying. Like the Devy guys, you can't be overreactionary, especially when you have 2 and 3 years worth of information on these guys. You can't overreact to one game. But of those guys, like I prefer him to Johnny Wilson a ton. Johnny Wilson had some right stats last night, but he's a guy that I don't project him as an NFL receiver. I don't think he moves well enough to be a receiver in the NFL. He's got really suspect hands, which is really weird to watch too, because you see some of his highlights. He makes incredible like one-handed catches with a guy draped all over him, and then he runs like a crossing route and it hits him in the chest and hits the ground on like a 3rd and 8. You're just like, dude, what are you doing? Like, it's not dependable. And I just think he's just like a straight line guy. So I don't know, like. The hope is that someone takes him on as a move tight end, like a Darren Waller type thing down the road, but he's not someone I'm targeting for Devy, and even for CFF. Like last year, he was okay. He had like 700, 800 yards, but with Keon Coleman there, I think Keon Coleman's the main guy, so it's not someone I target as like a every week starter on CFF either. So Jordan Travis, I like Jordan Travis. His pocket awareness is really good. His arm is decent, but I don't know. He's one of those guys that, like, I think his value long term and come draft season depends a lot on what they do as a team. If they make the playoff, then I think he gets that boost up just from the publicity of the team performance. If they stumble and lose a couple games and kind of fade out, I think he kind of fades out with it.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to look at Travis, especially in comparison to a tier of guys that you're putting him against in the sort of race for QB3. Like I'm not a big JJ McCarthy guy, but I think if Michigan stumbled, I think that JJ McCarthy would retain more value just based on his prospect profile and his size, his background. Like, just being mindful of Travis, that he could totally take this unbelievable upswing. And Vince in our chat, as always, I saw, I think it was in our chat that we dropped like the Russ Wilson comparison for Jordan Travis. Like, I could see that. It's just temper and be mindful of that he's got some work to do to get up there into that tier.
Yeah, like you saw the one play, he plays. They call it like backyard football. You see when he's really, really pocket aware, and he feels pressure coming really well, and his escapability is really good that way. But you saw last night, I think the game was tied, and he like lobbed a grenade from his own end zone that should have been intercepted for like a pick six, which could have changed the whole course of the game. And he just threw it up blindly. And you got to think he's I think he's a 5th-year guy too. Like, yeah. I guess you got to kind of take those plays, the good with the bad, when it comes to a guy like that who plays in that style. But you hate seeing that kind of stuff.
You do. You hate it. But keep an eye on all those guys. And I agree with you on Wilson. I brought up Wilson last week. He's just not an NFL receiver to me. If he moves to tight end, maybe, but I don't really see tight end. He doesn't showcase a tight end skill set really. So I don't really see that move happening. Um, any other stock ups to that you wanted to bring up, or any other major changers for you?
Uh, I think Cam Ward at Washington State is a guy to kind of keep an eye on too, as a possible guy for a quarterback for this year. He looked really good yesterday. He, uh, 450 yards and 3 touchdowns and rushed for one. He was a guy that got a ton of hype last year coming in. He came out from Incarnate Ward, and it kind of didn't all come together last year. And this year looks like they put it all together. So he's an interesting guy. He's got a big arm. He's good pocket awareness guy. I just wrote down a couple guys that were maybe guys that we weren't sure of, but maybe recoup some value or that maybe got clear signs on. I think CJ Donaldson at West Virginia is a guy who I sat in my leagues yesterday. There's been a lot of people, a lot of CFF guys and Devy guys kind of down on him, thinking he was just kind of a one-hit wonder last year, kind of came out of nowhere. But he was good against Penn State. He had 81 yards and a touchdown. He looked like he's in a little better shape this year. He's another one of those big bruiser, like 6'1", 230-pound running backs. He looked a little slimmer. His footwork looked a little better. I read last week right up on him about him taking his conditioning and stuff a lot more seriously this offseason. So that looked good. DJU looked really good for Oregon State.
DJU looked really good.
He's another guy I talked about. We did the C2C trade portal show with Todd FF Bannerman. Nerd and I did that. Yep. We talked about freshman quarterbacks, and Aiden Childs was the one that a lot of people were high on. And I kind of brought up, like, there's parallels with DJU coming to Oregon State, same as Bo Nix when he went to Oregon. And, like, this is kind of a lateral move, but the Pac-12 defenses, maybe a fresh start. That's something for DJU. He looked good yesterday, and he's got another year of eligibility left after this year. So if they perform well and make a bowl, win a bowl game, I think next year's quarterback class is a lot weaker than the potential we have for this one. And I think there's that potential that he comes back for a fifth year there, and that kind of puts a damper on Aiden Childs if he has to sit for 2 years. Which I don't know. It's hard to say. It's just something to keep in the back of mind. DJU was a 5-star like QB1 recruit. If they go 8-4, something like that, and win a bowl game, they're not going to replace him next year if he comes back. It's just one of those things. And J. Michael Sturman is another guy at UCLA. He was a Cal transfer to UCLA. He was a 0 as a freshman, but he didn't even touch the field. They played. It was COVID freshman year, and Cal only, like Pac-12 only played 4 games, so he never saw any action. Last year he was really well, and then he transferred to UCLA, and it looks like he's going to be the focal point of their passing offense, which is fantastic. He had 5 for 136 and a touchdown on 10 targets. If you don't know him, he was a decent recruit, 4-star recruit, really heavily recruited out of Texas. He's a track star too. He's like a big 200-meter track athlete. He's like 6'3", 200 track speed. I think he was Dane Brugler's like wide receiver 5 for the class this year, preseason. So he's on the draft radar. He's some guy to, if you're in a Devy league or C2C league, he's some guy I would target for. He won't be on waiver wires picked up everywhere, but he's a guy I target trades. I think his CFF potential is pretty high this year. So he's a guy I really like.
Yep. Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. I will. Guy that stood out a little for me. Not a huge leap up, but just guy I'm always watching. Troy Franklin had a really good game. Low level competition, but just given the influx of receivers into that room, I was interested to just see what it would all look like, and if Franklin would emerge as sort of the go-to guy, kind of like Keon Coleman in that Florida State room. Just like, would he be that guy? And I think Franklin is a better NFL prospect than Coleman by a lot. And I think just seeing the clips of him, the things he was doing, it looks like he is just continuing to advance his game, which we've seen from him since his freshman year. Incredibly highly thought of recruit, but who's just continually gotten better and improved the nuance in his game. I'm excited to see him. He's a guy who's could be in the conversation for the wide receiver 3 spot in this class.
Yeah.
By the time all's said and done, he's got tools for that. He stood out to me a little bit. And some of the sophomore QBs mentioned Weigman, but Drew Alar for Penn State, you know, looked the part in game one. And it wasn't, you know, West Virginia isn't nothing competition. So that was, he had what I would say a solid, impressive start, and sort of people wondering, is he sort of the top QB going into 2025? I think he showed the tools that he can do that. QB is still a hard one to project, but he looked really good.
Yeah, I think a really positive trend over the whole weekend was the quarterbacks, young quarterbacks performing.
Yeah,
we saw a lot of freshman quarterbacks get in with Rashad starting. Dante Moore got in because Garbers was not well, and he played well. Jackson Arnold was kind of perfect and came in. Like Oklahoma did whatever they wanted. It was
whatever
really good, but they're right from the first snap till the end, they were super efficient. They had like a 90% completion percentage for the quarterbacks for the whole game. So that's pretty impressive. So
Novosad got in for Oregon. Novosad got some play for Oregon and actually had went 3 for 3. Got a little play. So yeah, some of the freshmen got in and did well. And that's a great trend to see. I mean, we're entering this quarterback era where I think we're just going to have an incredible amount of talent over the next few years on the quarterback front. And we're just like I saw an Alar tweet, and I know people, you know, you get the Caleb Williams tweets of, you know, he's a combination of Patrick Mahomes and Johnny Unitas and every single comp you can have. And then same thing, it was Drew Alar is a combination of Josh Allen and Brett Favre and whatever else. And you're going to start to see that trend. I just don't think that's going to stop. Going down to 26, like that 26 class, you named a few of them, you know, and Chiles you named to be a little hesitant on in the immediate sense because of DJU, but he got on the field a little bit and looked pretty good. So that class is going to be unbelievable. This year's class, I think, is going to be a lot better than last year's class, a lot deeper. And I think 25 might look the same. And we haven't even seen Klubnik and Riley Leonard who square off tonight. Yeah. Awesome. And before we go to next man up, just one interesting note of some zero plays of some big names that we're hitting up. Devontae Walker seems like his NCAA status has not been figured out yet, unfortunately. I think that's utterly ridiculous, but he is, at least as of now, not playing. Seydou Traore, same way. It seems like he wasn't even listed on the depth chart for Mississippi State. Zachary Franklin at Ole Miss, haven't seen get in yet. And we didn't see any Alton McCaskill at Colorado either. All four fit the profile of guys who took that, you know, they're all transfer ups. And this is one of the risks of transfer ups, I think, on the C2C side, is that some of these guys have high draft capital on that side, and there is risk that they might not even get to hit their depth charts, at least early on.
Yeah, I think Zachary Franklin is the most troubling one because Trey Harris had 4 touchdowns yesterday. Trey Harris had
he had
6 for 133 and 4 touchdowns. I think all 4 touchdowns were Jackson Dart's touchdowns.
Yep.
And he had 3 of them in the first quarter. So I don't know if you go back to like the last few years, Ole Miss has got a reputation for getting major production out of these older receivers, especially ones that are like transfer ups too. Like Dontario Drummond was like a almost 24-year-old receiver who put up massive numbers there a couple years ago with Matt Corral. So Trey Harris he was on the Blitnikoff watch list. So he's a guy that I think his role is pretty established. I think Jordan Watkins he was really good in the spring. Jordan Watkins had 100 yards receiving yesterday as well. So
he did.
So Franklin he's a guy like CFF community was super high on when he was at UTSA. And then even transferring to Ole Miss, who's still like, hey, if he takes over that spot, we've seen the production in the past. But I think that's troubling to see that kind of production from 2 other guys on the same team before that. So
for sure.
It's a tough one.
All right, before we close out, we always want to close out with next man up, and thinking about next year's freshman class. Do you want to start off with your name of the week?
Yeah, sure. So I'll go back to the 24 freshman class. Back to the receivers is Michael Hudson. He is a receiver from Texas. He is my number 2 receiver in the class. Uh, he is from, I think, Lake Belton, Texas. My player comp for him was like a Brandon Ayuk play style. So he's like a wiry, physical, do everything receiver. He wins contested catches, good route runner, really good after the catch. He started off the season pretty well. He has a couple hundred yards and 2 touchdowns his first 2 games there. So he works with like one of the best wide receiver coaches in Texas too. The same coach who was Jonte Cook and Evan Stewart's personal receiver coach. So I follow him on Twitter, and he posts all kinds of stuff like that. His resume is insane. He's also Sturt Advanced wide receiver coach, Jordan Hudson, Jaron Brad. Anyone that's going to Texas in the last 3 or 4 years, they go through him. So that's something to talk, like what we talked about with the quarterbacks coming in more developed. I think you see it, especially with the quarterbacks and especially wide receivers, is the growth of the 7-on-7 play across the states.
Yes.
The 7-on-7 tournaments, they're taking hold of even as much popularity and as much traction as the actual football seasons. I know Texas, I don't know if all states do it, but I know Texas has their own state 7-on-7 tournaments as well, outside of the football
California
season.
does. Pretty sure California might too.
So those are a big thing where they're just basically skill focused. They're just on quick decisions from the quarterbacks, quick reads, getting the ball out fast, receivers beating guys off the line of scrimmage, contested catches. It's just, so I think a lot of that skill development, you're seeing these guys come into college ready to go. They need a lot less development than they did in the past. So yeah, so he's a guy that I really like going forward.
Awesome. Is he committed yet?
I believe he's committed to Texas Tech, which is good. I kind of like that. I kind of like those guys going to, same as Trader, who I talked about last week, is going to Miami. I kind of like those guys that are going to be like the program builder type guys and get these schools back on the map. And that's Texas Tech is a really fun offense if you get like a dynamic receiver who's that skilled right off the top.
It is.
So I'm excited for him. I hope he stays there. There was talk between him switching back and going to Texas, but Texas already has enough talent. I don't think I'd rather see him go be the top guy at Texas Tech.
Yeah, and if you're, the 7-on-7 point is really important, both for player skill development, but also for scouting, and player performance in those 7-on-7s matters. And there's starting to be a trajectory of it translating because they're playing against much higher competition. Like that was one of my big sources for clips and just little film snippets I found and was watching on Mikey Matthews, who actually looked good for Utah and looked like he led the team in targets in game 1 with no QB. So I'm interested to see what'll happen with Rising. He was on the field all the time, but yeah, it was 7-on-7s. And they're bringing people from all over the country, and the clips matter, the performances matter, and the talent development matters. So I also went 2024 recruiting class, not NFL draft class, to preview a new freshman for you, Cam Coleman. Very different from Hudson. Cam Coleman is listed on On3 as 6'3.5", 185. So he's a tall guy. He's been a 2-sport athlete, and he's from Phoenix City, Alabama, and actually plays for Patrick Nix in high school, who used to be an Auburn QB, and Bo Nix's dad. So he's definitely likewise got really good coaching going on for him. His tape is electric. I mean, I texted you this, and you're like, God, I hope not. But I was like, is he the next coming of George Pickens? Just because his high school, like when you're looking for clips of him, there are just so many like they're just literally clips where there are 4 guys trying to cover him and he's just jumping above them. His vertical is unbelievable. I think I'm optimistic that he can potentially do even more than Pickens. And be a little bit more versatile. It's really young still. Like looking at his interviews, he talks a lot about wanting to improve his breaks, improve his quickness coming off the line. But he can burn guys deep. He shows some evidence that he can go a little bit over the middle of the field. He is great after the catch. Like he breaks tackles and is really physical and uses his size well, which I love to see in wide receivers, especially, and especially ones that are big. Like I think about, Jerry and Dickey this year, for example, like big guy who uses size really well and is a little bit like some of the big guys take a little bit more to develop that nuance. But I'm excited for Coleman. He's committed to Texas A&M right now, which is a really interesting spot for him. I think he fits their room really well. Like if he gets a year with Evan Stewart, he adds something to their room. They don't really have a sort of above 6'3" guy who can kind of go deep and go up like he can. Evan Stewart can obviously go deep. He's just a smaller prototype. So that's an interesting place for him. And if Petrino stays there, it can be a really, really fun offense for him. But whether he stays there or not, we'll see. He's got Auburn, Clemson, and LSU listed as his next 3. So doesn't seem to be a hard commit quite yet at this point. So we'll see if I hope he doesn't go to Auburn. I'll say that much for it. That would be a
he was a Clemson commit. He flipped his commitment from Clemson to A&M.
He flipped to A&M.
Yeah. So he's an interesting kid. He was on 3 was higher than than the other services initially. He was another on 7-on-7 tour kid last year. That's where his ratings jump a ton. I like him. I like him a lot actually. He was I think he was my wide receiver 11 initially.
Okay.
So he's in that tier, and especially for a guy who's just he's pretty raw as a receiver. But when you get into that class, there's a couple guys who are big size speed guys, but there's a couple in particular that are really, really high that do not play the game fast, and he's not one. He's a guy that I could see be in the top 3 or 4 guys in the class when it's all said and done. So I'm interested to see him this year.
Yeah, I agree. Super excited about it. With that, we are going to close out. Todd and I thank you very much for tuning in to Devy Degens this week. We will see you again next week for episode 3. Can't wait.
All right. See you next week.
Later, man.
Yeah, the revolution, y'all. Yep, the revolution.
The revolution, y'all, will not be televised.
Yeah, you gotta wake up, open your eyes.
Make a change in your life.
And find a new way of living.
It's time to start living for the children.
Everybody look into my life. Tell me what you see. The perseverance of a young man sitting is so free. LA Mac, be the champ, but still fighting the struggle. They couldn't shut my mouth with a muzzle. I'm hard to figure like a puzzle. My name ought to be Jigsaw. Rough around the edges, I've been known to spit raw. Always with a pen and a book. I'm kinda thin and I look real suspicious.